Is it true that the speakers of minoritized languages such as Kashubian, Basque, or Ainu spoken in Japan can strengthen, promote, and transmit their languages only through the legal and social mechanisms? Well, I don't really think so, because the advancement in the artificial intelligence, especially in the language technologies, opens a variety of opportunities for the documentation and revitalization of the under-resourced languages. I mentioned the word under-resourced languages. What are these languages? Well, these are the languages that lack efficient number of digital resources for the development of language technologies. Are there any users of language technologies in this room? I'm pretty sure that many of us have used such tools as, for example, DeepL, Google Translate, or ChatGPT at least once for improving the wording of our grant applications. Also, for example, spell checking functions in word processing software has saved many of us from some embarrassing mistakes. And also speech-to-text tools enable some of us to phrase some short messages while we are driving or, for example, cooking. But has it always been like that when it comes to the Polish language? Have these tools always been that efficient? Well, let the person who has never experienced any frustration when using an automatic translator cast their first stone. I remember very well the astonishment when I was using an automatic translator sometime in the past, and I tried to find a translation of the commercial phrase "paczka wyszła," and it was rendered as "the gang left," and it happened sometimes around 2010. So. Luckily, we are far better off right now with our tools. But what about the users of languages that are not that lucky, who want to use these digital resources, but, for example, cannot use it in their native languages? And in fact, this is the topic of my research. I work with Mongolic and Tungusic languages, and also for the last 3 years, I have been working with language minorities in Thailand. I also possess experience in computational linguistics and automatic speech recognition that I gained in an IT company. So in my research, I work towards counterfeiting the exclusion of under-resourced languages in the modern language technologies. If we want to work with language communities who use under-resourced languages, we really have to make sure that we understand the needs of these communities and also that our engagement is welcome into these activities. It is one of the most important principles that is guiding us in our Horizon Europe Fosterlang project led by Professor Justyna Olko at the Faculty of Artes Liberales, where I focus my research on the digital inclusion of under-resourced languages and also on the analysis of demo-linguistic data. So I started my research on the availability of language technologies for under-resourced languages when I carried out a review of corpora for Halch Mongolian language spoken in Mongolia, Buryat language spoken in Russia, and Mongolian language spoken in Inner Mongolia in China. I mentioned the word corpora. What are corpora? Well, these are digital collections of texts that are written or spoken of one or several languages. And these collections are organized in a systematic way, and they are accompanied by metadata. Metadata means, for example, information about the time and the geographical area of origin of a given text. And the more metadata we have, the better. Then, thanks to the National Science Center Miniatura grant, together with Professor Delphine Bernard from the University of Strasbourg, we created an experimental Dagur language corpus. Dagur language is an endangered language spoken mostly in Inner Mongolia in China. It has 4 different dialects and no unified written standard. But what do we do if we want to experiment on such a corpus, but the language doesn't have enough digital resources? Well, then we use the methodology of transfer learning, and this is what we did. We fine-tuned a multilingual language model, and we applied it to our Dagur corpus. And in our further experiments, we came to the conclusion that working with our with a multilingual language model and also improving it on the basis of Basque data, rendered some positive results for the Dagur language. But what does it mean? Does it mean that Basque and Dagur are related and that we have just resolved one of the most palpitating linguistic riddles of the origin of the Basque language? Well, of course not. But it shows us that these two languages share some morphological features. They are both agglutinative, they have no grammatical gender, and they have a subject, object, verb, sentence structure. So what do we learn from this example? Well, language technologies help us understand how both dominating and under-resourced languages work. They cannot save low-resource languages, and by no means this is not what I'm trying to say, but they can be very useful tools in the hands of linguists, researchers, engineers, and also language communities. Also, when I was carrying out my research in Thailand, and when I was carrying out a feasibility study about whether there is a need and possibility to include voice technologies for several under-resourced languages of northern and southern Thailand, I came to several conclusions that I addressed together with my colleagues, with Dr. Shekhar Nayak from the University of Groningen and Professor Sumitra Suraradeccha from Mahidol University. We addressed these aspects in the Association for Computational Linguistics publication. So we came to the conclusion that, for example, if we ask about the privilege to work with a community and jointly develop a tool for voice technology, we have to explain very carefully to this community what will happen with the data that we collect, how we will process it, and how we will store it. Also, we have to explain the benefits that the community will draw from this cooperation. The second thing to take into consideration is also, for example, the script that we need to use while developing technologies. Sometimes there are competing scripts. There are even competing orthographies within one script. So we have to take that into consideration too and discuss it with the community. Last but not least, also we have to take into consideration the so-called heritage data, which means the historical data that has been collected by researchers, by language communities, and also, for example, by missionaries. We have to take into consideration how we want to incorporate this data into the corpus, and also, for example, what's the current author's rights situation pertaining to this data. So is it worth including under-resourced languages into language technologies? Well, definitely yes, and this is also an objective of the European Union, which is promoting the digital language equality, and the goal of this initiative is to provide the speakers of all languages of the European Union with equal access to services and tools offered in European Union in these languages. Also, Google, for example, added around 100 languages to Google Translate in 2024, setting a positive example for other IT companies. Adding low-resource, under-resourced languages into the worldwide development of language technologies invites the speakers of these languages into this process. It also facilitates the transgenerational transmission of languages and makes the development of artificial intelligence open, inclusive, and human. Thank you very much for your attention.